The process of letter carving in stone by hand hasn't really changed that much in the last 2,000 years. Neither has letterpress printing. From the 1440s up to about 1970, it was practiced pretty much the same way. So when I pick up a mallet and chisel or a piece of type, I often feel like I'm shaking hands with a vast tradition of anonymous craftspeople. But the cool thing is that tradition extends to the present day. So I feel very lucky that my teachers, people like John Christensen and Nick Benson and Brooke Roberts, they become both my heroes and my friends. But I feel a strong responsibility to pay it forward to help keep the tradition alive. I think the idea of cemeteries, especially colonial burial grounds, as a sanctuary, as a place of reflection, is something I've always been really drawn to. The slate inscriptions are still really legible, and these monuments are really all we have, except for a few pieces of folk art, of this pivotal time in American history where whatever creative ability they had, they often invested in how they remembered their loved ones. The function that crafts perform in modern society, even though they run totally against the vein of technological advancement, they're still providing an essential role in the quality of our lives. People come to me because they want the work that I do. This gives me an opportunity to explore typography, letterpress printing, calligraphy, stone carving, and do it in a way that it's actually commission-based. It's not me just in my studio making art that pleases only me. For me, it's important to position myself so that people can come to me for projects. I used to be a writer who occasionally printed, and then I became a printer who occasionally wrote. And now I'm a letter carver and printer who works in the service of other people's writing. In the collaborative experience of a client coming to me and saying, I want to celebrate my wife who passed away. I don't want just information in stone. I'm able to design something of the aesthetic spirit into the finished inscription, trying to create a celebratory monument. No matter how advanced we get and how wrapped up in machines we become, I think there's always going to be a need to slow down and to engage with our hands and make something that is a product of our time and the best of our creative energy. Letterpress printing is the process of printing using hand-set metal type and old-fashioned presses. It's a very simple process. It's basically an irreducible combination of type, ink, paper, and pressure. I have a few presses here that allow me to do work at a commercial scale. It's a very slow, very contemplative process. There's a lot of things you just have to kind of corral and get in line. Arguably the most important one is choosing the right typeface. We like to think that typefaces speak in their own tone of voice. I've made a specialty of collecting typefaces that evoke calligraphy, made back in the mid-20th century by European foundries. You set the type by hand. You're setting one letter at a time. You have a holder that's called a composing stick, and that's where you set the line. And then once you have the form, and then you determine what your margins are going to be, what the dimension of the project will be. You have to cut the paper exactly to size, and that can be a considerable part of it, knowing what thickness to use, what color. There's an innumerable variety of papers available. And you have to calibrate the press so that the impression is what you want it at, and mix the ink to the right color, applying the ink onto the press so that it's not too much or too little, and then it's just a matter of standing at the press, feeding the paper in one at a time, and if there's more than one color, you have to do it a second time. But ultimately, what you get is a stack of nicely printed typography, and then it's ready to go out into the world. Carvings begin with a rough sketch on paper in pencil, and then from there it goes to either brushwork or pen work. And I create series of layouts to get to the point where I feel like I can do the final tracing. And the tracing is really the thing that goes onto the stone. It gets transferred with a stylus and carbon paper, basically tracing over exactly what I've designed. And that leaves a white outline. And from that outline, I then brush the letter forms back in so that I'm carving from a volume as opposed to an outline. So the chisel and the brush are kind of communicating with each other through the medium of stone. And that really is sort of the Roman method. Letter carving is a sculptural process. It is an artistic skill. You're removing stone and you're done when there's nothing left to remove. The more time you invest in the making of a product or a project, the greater the risk of slippage or inattention or carelessness. And there are certain projects in letter carving where you're carving for a long time, working on a memorial, and if for whatever reason the chisel slips at the end of it, you theoretically have to do the whole thing over again. And the fact that there is so much risk involved, I find that to be a great motivator and a source of discipline, because it really forces me to slow down and take the time it takes to do a good job. The thing that this work requires is a knowledgeable clientele. Even if they don't necessarily know what goes into lettering design, there's something about the hand-carved letter and the calligraphically designed letter form that speaks to someone's humanity. I really deeply care about communicating something of value, something that will stand the test of time.